So Britt,
Yeah.
and you asked this question on text, and I was just like, oh, that's an amazing question. In the movie Aliens, and I think even in the original Alien, because you've got Ash as the sort of the cyborg who's the science, who's basically bringing the alien on board to study it. Who's the bad guy in Aliens? Is it the alien, the Queen Mother, the tens, maybe hundreds of the alien creatures? Or is it Burke, the company guy who basically sent the colonists to their death and then was willing to impregnate Newt and Ripley with the embryos to put them in stasis to bring them back on Earth? And I think by asking the question that way, I think we know what my answer is.
Well, I think the question, it wasn't a question. It was posed at one point and stated at one point by Ripley in the movie. At one point, she says, you're worse than our species is worse than their species. That's what she ends up saying. Like, because when they kind of figure out all that he's done and all that he was willing to do for his own profit, for the corporate, and don't forget, that was part of his justification, was for the and
cash money.
But all that he was willing to do, she says, our species is worse than theirs because you don't see them screwing each other over. That's what she says. You don't see the aliens screwing each other over for profit. That's what she says. And yeah. I wrote that quote down, and that's why I asked you, who's the bigger villain? It wasn't who is the real villain, it's who's the bigger villain. Because as we deal with things in life, I think there's a couple of different ways we can look at it, but because obviously the main threat that she had to deal with and confront by the end of the movie was the Queen. Like, that's the main threat.
That was the boss.
That's the big boss in the video game. She was the big. This is a total video game. This would have been a great video game.
I think it was.
Was it?
I feel like I played it.
Okay. But however, the aliens, much like the devil and the demons, much like on a spiritual level, I don't think God is up there disappointed in the devil anymore. Maybe he was at one point, maybe he is, but the God's not up there going, come on, devil, man, I really, you're going to do that again? Like, I think it's pretty standard in God's economy that he realizes that the devil is lost, and the devil is going to steal, kill, and destroy. That's what he's going to do. And he has come, this is 1 John, I believe, he has come to undo the works of the devil. That's what he's come to do. However, there are humans who are also in great threat by the same enemy, who work with that enemy, who literally consciously, like he does in the movie, work with that enemy. And it is very tempting because I think God's actually disappointed in those people. Like, I think that actually breaks his heart when people decide, instead of fighting the enemy that is out to kill all of us, because the aliens didn't care who you were. They were going to kill you and put stuff in you, and it's going to come out and make you, all that, use you as for the eggs and stuff. But like, instead of seeing that reality and allowing that to unify us, these people bring division and work with the enemy instead of against them. And I think that breaks.
Yeah, because really the aliens are basically, if I'm a fly, the frog's a bad guy.
Right.
If I'm an antelope, the lion's a bad guy. If I'm a bird, the cat is a bad guy, right? All the, Tweety Bird and Putty Tat or Sylvester, that's it. but it's nothing. It's like not an evil intent. It's just biologic way of life cycle. However, what Burke is doing is the idea that if we're out hiking and we come across a bear, I don't need to be faster than the bear. I need to be faster than you.
Need to be faster than you.
Because this is somebody that he would be, the alien would attack him without even knowing. They don't care.
And did.
They don't have any, there's no sort of morality or anything with them. They're just, this is who they are. As I think you were talking about with Satan and the demons. That's like, they've made their decision. That's who they are. There's no hope for redemption. But for Burke, there was. And what you see is a guy who consistently put his needs and his desires above the needs and the desires of other people. He sent the colonists to investigate after Ridley's report. He manipulated Ripley into going.
Right.
He put Ripley, he lied to her to say, yeah, we're going to go destroy him. He, knocked over the things so they would attack her and Newt. He is consistently putting others in danger so that he can get ahead.
Right.
And so, as you mentioned, the biggest villain, and how do we do that? Right. I was talking to somebody about a toxic work environment. And what happens is everybody keeps their head down unless they have the opportunity to sort of offer somebody else's bait, as the goat in Jurassic Park.
Right.
They'll point out somebody else so that toxic leader who's seen as a pit bull will attack them and leave them alone. And that's what you see in Burke is, no, go attack her. And so that he can survive and he can, look good for the eyes of his stockholders or something. And, it's movies like this that make us wonder why the conspiracy theories and hatred of big business comes from.
Unfortunately, it happens because there are people who take advantage of those positions. Just like sometimes it's overstated, in my opinion, and I think it's overstated due to reality. It's become almost cliche. But that's why you see a lot of times in movies where there's a religious figure who is corrupt. It just happens. It does happen. Does it happen as much as Hollywood wants us to think it happens? No. But, the pastor who actually loves people and works and sacrifices to help everybody, that guy doesn't make the news, right? Especially in our culture today. But I'm reminded of something that I have read, and there's a very famous and should be famous piece of literature, and that is Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail. And a lot of you would have hopefully, please God, I hope you read this in school, because we may not do a lot of justice to the racism that has been going on in our country, but please, just if you haven't read it in school, don't tell me, because it'll just piss me off. But
I'll put a link in our show notes and on our webpage so you guys can go to Amazon and check it out. It's one of the
most beautifully written, passionate appeals that Martin Luther King Jr. makes, because a group of white ministers write him a letter first, and they are like, look, we totally get it. This is bad. Racism's bad. This is in 1963, by the way. But just you're making too much noise about this whole thing. You're actually doing, they're asking him, Martin Luther King Jr., to stop being so public about it. Stop being so confrontational about this issue. Now, realize this is 1963. It's not just like people have said mean things. Like Medgar Evers was killed. The 4 girls in church were killed because of the bombing at a Birmingham church, right? And so this was a fairly serious issue, okay? But my point is that he was treating it like a serious issue. He was treating it like this is important. And here he had these white pastors, Christians, who were telling him, you're making too big of a stink. And so he writes a letter in response in which he says that the white moderates who just kind of passively aggressively let this thing go on. They say one thing and they kind of just let things happen. Anyway, they're more frustrating than the KKK, who would just kill us if they had the chance. They're actually more frustrating. This is the Britt Mooney summary of what Martin Luther King Jr. says. Martin Luther King Jr. was a brilliant writer and did it way better than me, which is why you should read it. But that's kind of how I feel in this movie, is that Burke keeps making these compromises. Well, because she's like, look, this is serious. I'm telling you it's serious. I have the trauma that tells you that this is serious. Our only option is to go into space and nuke this place. That's it. Right? And he's like, well, yeah, but this costs a lot of money. And like, he's about this, like, we got to keep this system going. And we're even going to maybe take some samples with us, so we can think about what the bio division would, weapons bio division or what, like he keeps saying. And it's like, that's more frustrating. Are they a bigger enemy? I don't know, but it's more disappointing and it breaks God's heart more. And it breaks our heart more, right? It's one thing if the devil's out to kill us. It's one thing if the pastor is corrupt and your father abuses you. See what I mean? Like, that's a totally different thing, because that's not how it was supposed to work. And I just think it's a very interesting question. Who's the bigger villain in the movie? Because you could make the argument that it's Burke.
And that question is going to shape the rest of our conversation on our podcast. So if you're seeing this on YouTube and you haven't seen the podcast, go to menatthemovies.com/podcast or Spotify, Apple Pods, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. Go check it out, because we're going to talk about more of how we can sort of see these toxic people, toxic masculinity, toxic femininity, and how we can be godly role models, where we can take the power that we've been entrusted with and use that for the good of those that entrusted to our care. And so flip over to those. The links will be below, and subscribe, and hope to see you next time here with the Men at the Movies podcast.